Imagine being a young, innocent romance reader and browsing the virtual shelves only to find Omegaverse.
Hello everybody, my name is Courtney. Welcome to my channel. This is where I talk about books I like, books I love, and everything in between. So I know I've been talking a lot about Omegaverse on my channel, and I've actually been getting a lot of comments and messages on my Instagram and stuff of people who've never delved into the genre asking me what Omegaverse books they should pick up. I thought it was a good chance for me to tell you guys my top 5 Omegaverse books that I have read so far. I've read quite a few, and like I said, I am very picky, so it's very easy for me to not like an Omegaverse book. I like strong alpha males. I don't like non-consent in my Omegaverse. If I am doing non-consent, it's usually in a dark romance where it makes more sense, but I don't like the kind of abusive relationships between Omegas and Alphas in a lot of Omegaverse books. I don't like sweetverse. If it's a sweet relationship, I might as well read any other contemporary romance, to be honest. That being said, these are the top 5 Omegaverse books that I have read so far. I'm gonna go easy first, and I'm gonna go with the Omegaverse book that I started with, and that is Kian by Callie Rhodes, and it's the first in the Boundaryland series. The Boundaryland series is very long, all about different characters, so you don't have to read the, it's not a series that you have to read in order. You can kind of pick and choose which ones you like. I started with the first one, which is Kian. That is not my favorite. I can't remember what my favorite is because I read a lot of them. There's over a dozen of them in this series, and there's also a spin-off series of it. But anyways, it is set in the modern day where betas are separated and they're kind of in their normal society, and alphas, who are, if you remember, are the more aggressive types, genetically larger, in need of their own property, their own territory. So they are given what are called the boundary lands. When you find out that you are an alpha, because usually in this universe, in any Omegaverse universe, you usually find out if you're an alpha, a beta, or an omega when you hit puberty. So in this world, when they hit puberty and they find out you're an alpha, they send you to the boundary lands to be an alpha with other alphas, away from society where you could be a menace. The betas live on the other side of this border. Omegas also live on the other side of this border. And the thing with Omegas in this world is that they don't know if they're an Omega unless they touch or come into contact with an Alpha. So a lot of women do not want to cross into the boundary lands for fear of being touched by an Alpha and possibly having their Omega side awakened. And then they have this whole fear of suddenly being taken and used as a breeding tool, or somebody that's just a sex slave and becoming a slave to their Omega instincts, which essentially just means they're going to go into heat a lot and have lots of sex and not be in control of themselves anymore. So each book kind of involves somebody coming over from the beta side and finding out they're an Omega by coming into contact with an Alpha, and then finding out that these rumors about being imprisoned against their will are not true. And in the first one, if I remember correctly, it starts out with this girl, I don't remember her name, who is in a car with her boyfriend and his friend, who are calling her horrible names, and he's saying stuff like, "You cheated on me." But to punish her for, I don't know, talking to another guy, they drive to the boundary lands, they drive past the border, and they dump her out of the car and they drive away. And she is forced to walk, all scratched up from being dumped out of the car. She is forced to try and walk back to the border. And this sexy alpha, because she walks past this bar or whatever, because it's just normal society on the other side in the boundary lines. They all have their own log cabin that a lot of these alphas just built themselves, and they all have their own territories, but they're fairly normal. And so she's walking past this bar, and this guy walks out. I think he owns the bar. He walks out and he's like, "You look really scratched up and in need of help." And she's like, "Don't touch me. Don't touch me. Please don't touch me. I am scared. Just ignore me." And he is basically like, "No, you need help." And he touches her, and all of a sudden her Omega side wakes up, and he's like, "You're mine now." And they are consumed by this spicy need to just screw a lot. So they do. And then it develops from there, where they get to know each other. He claims her as his alpha, because if you don't claim an Omega, Other alphas will try and claim that Omega because everybody wants an Omega. So he claims her, and then they actually do develop a nice like relationship. So every book kind of follows that formula, but they're about different characters and different, like they have different stories and things like that. So I personally feel like that's a very tame way to start your Omegaverse journey. The second one I have on my list is the Andorra Sector, and that is the first in the X Clan series by Lexi C. Foss. This one is werewolves, and it is set in a post-apocalyptic world. Zombies have taken over the world. Humans basically are just expected to survive in the wilderness. Werewolves have created these societies all over the world that are blocked off from the rest of civilization, or whatever is left of civilization. And they have electricity, they have all these like amenities that you don't have out in the wilderness. And it follows this girl, I think it's her and her brother try and steal from one of the sectors, which is the Andorra Sector. They're trying to steal food or something. And she doesn't know that's what her brother has planned when she agrees to this plan. So when she finds out they're stealing from one of the sectors, she freaks out. They get caught. She gets taken back to the Andorra Sector, where they turn her in hopes that she will become an Omega werewolf. And they do this against her will. So she becomes a werewolf, and basically the head of the Andorra Sector, who is the alpha wolf, wants to claim her. And she doesn't want that. She comes from a society where everyone is more or less equal. And in this society, if you are an Omega, you are the lowest of the low. Because if you know Omegaverse, you know that Omegas are thought of as the bottom of the chain of command. They're usually treated like dirt, which again, I don't understand, because Omegas are usually the only ones that can mate with alphas and have their babies. And they're also usually really rare, so I don't understand why they're treated like shit, but they are. She is treated like crap, and he expects her to obey because she's an Omega, and a lot of times Omegas don't really have a choice. It is ingrained in them genetically to obey their alphas, but she, because she was human first, and grew up in human society, does not adhere to those rules and that style of living, so she's very rebellious. He wants her to obey, and she doesn't want to obey, but then at the same time, they kind of have to learn to understand that both of them were brought up very, very differently. She starts to see how things work inside the sector. He starts to understand how things worked outside of the sector as a human. They start to become physically attracted to each other, and then it kind of like evolves into them being emotionally attracted to each other. I thought it was really interesting. It was a little bit borderline because there were instances where he was just a straight up asshole. But again, they kind of emphasize, Lexi emphasizes the fact that that is the way that he has lived his entire life. That is what he's used to. That is what his society usually is about. And we as humans obviously are not used to that, and our main character is not used to that and doesn't understand it. And they kind of meet a happy middle ground at some point in this book, which I really liked. And obviously werewolves is pretty cool. I really like that. The next one I have on my list is Stolen by the Wolves, and it is the first in Viking Omegaverse. I think that's the name of the series. It's by Lix Robinson. This is the first in an actual series that goes together. You can't just read each book on its own. It's about a little Christian girl in like this Viking era. And this clan of Vikings who are, I'm pretty sure they're called like wolves or something. So in my brain, I thought this was going to be a shifter Omegaverse type of situation because they're actually called wolves. They're not. They're not shifters whatsoever. That is just what they're called. But they are alphas. So alphas and Omegas kind of exist in general. This Viking society, Omegas are very prized, and because they're rare, like they're very sought after and respected, and they fully accept and respect the whole alpha, omega, beta like hierarchy. But in this Christian society where our girl comes from, if you are marked as a Omega, it is shameful. They make you feel very guilty about it. And so I'm pretty sure she knows what she is from the beginning. So she's kind of kept very sheltered. This Viking guy infiltrates her her kingdom by dressing up as a monk. And that is where they've kind of had their first encounter, because she goes to confess to a monk. And so she kind of confides in this random monk that she doesn't know. And they kind of start having a connection at that point, and that is where their entire relationship starts. But then she doesn't know that he is a Viking that infiltrated her kingdom, and he ends up kidnapping her and I think like her sister or her cousin or something. And you know, she starts getting very angry because when she was with the monk, they started having a connection and they actually had a, you know, a physical moment. And to find out that he was a Viking and that he deceived her, kind of, you know, it kind of almost becomes like enemies to lovers at that point because she hates him. And he's a dirty Viking and she is a good Christian girl. And it just kind of evolves from there. And I thought their relationship was like really, really pretty. And he's so protective of her. And despite the fact that she is an Omega and he is an Alpha, he not once ever forces himself on her, ever tries to convince her of anything, and actually makes a conscious effort to stay away from her because he knows the kind of urges that would happen between them if they were to be in the same room. And I thought that was really, really sweet, especially because he's like this scruffy Viking and she's like this tiny little redheaded like Christian girl. And it does end in a cliffhanger, or not really a cliffhanger, but it definitely does not close off in this book. I haven't read the second book. I just really like the first book, so if you want to check it out, I would absolutely recommend it. The next book in my list is Alien Desire, and is an alien Omegaverse. It is the first in the Alpha Prince of Estia, and it is written by Hannah Haze. The reason I liked this one, because it was aliens, and you know I like alien romance, but it is about this girl who crash lands on some icy planet and she has no way off of it. There's no civilization, but there is a refueling and resupplying depot where she goes and basically holes up and just starts surviving. And during her time there, another ship crashes and she ends up dragging this alien man out of the wreckage into her little supply depot and kind of like nursing him back to health. Turns out he is from a completely different universe. Not a different star system, not a different galaxy, a different universe. And in his universe, they have alpha, betas, and omegas. He claims that she is an omega. And she is like, I'm human, we don't have that where I come from. I don't know what you're talking about. And I deny everything and I reject your way of living. I reject this omega bullcrap. He keeps hitting on her, thinking because of, in his society, if you're an alpha hitting on an omega, obviously the omega is going to be like, yes, take me, please. But in her society, that's not a thing. So when he finds that out, he realizes that he has to work for the affection of this omega that he desperately wants. And he just thinks it's so weird that his like normal charms aren't working. And there's a language barrier between them for a big majority of the book because they are two species that I've never met before. So through a lot of the book, he's actually fiddling with like this computer, like trying to translate or trying to install their languages into this computer. And she doesn't know that's what he's doing. He's just fiddling with it for most of the book. But otherwise, they're trying to communicate with ways that are not speaking. And when she rejects him over and over, he starts to get it in his head that he needs to prove himself as a worthy alpha. And so there are little things that they do that are just really adorable. Like they play chess a lot. She has to teach him chess. And he gets it in his head that if he wins at this game, because she's really good at it, if he wins at this game, he will be proven, or he'll prove to her that he is worthy and he is strong and strategic and smart. So his whole goal through a lot of this book, because they're kind of stuck in this place, like it's a snowy planet, there's nowhere else to go. So they're kind of stuck here in close proximity, like getting to know each other. So he gets in his head that he has to win chess and then she will sleep with him. And so he's putting all this effort in, and at the point when he finally wins at this game that he just learned, he expects like this massive prize. He's like, I'm gonna get my mate, I'm gonna get my omega. She kind of looks at him, she holds out her hand, she's like, good game. And she walks away and he's like, what do I have to do? And it's just really funny because the fact that he can't just easily acquire her was really fun, because it's not normally in an omega alpha situation, it's just instantaneous. It starts from lust and it turns into something else. But in this situation, she completely rejects it and he has to work so hard. And then later, after they've already gotten to know each other, then, you know, she feels a little bit of that omega like pull, and they have their moment. But it definitely needed to be worked for, and I enjoyed that. The last book that I have on my list is probably a little bit more for the less sensitive people, less sensitive readers, and it is called After the Fade. It is book 1 in Rise, the Rise series, and it is written by Cameron and Emilia Foxe, who I believe are sisters. This book is set in a dystopian world, and it's been a really long time since I've read it, so I don't know how correct I am, but it's set in a dystopian world where there are a lot of people just kind of caught on the outskirts who are impoverished. They are fighting for their lives. And then you have the elites. And in this case, it follows one elite family, and they're a family of alphas. It is a father, and it is 3 sons. The father really wants an Omega for his sons for no other reason than to just be like passed around to alleviate some of their sexual tension or their sexual needs. So they basically buy an Omega, and it is all about this Omega woman. I don't remember her name. She has no rights because she's an Omega. So she has no rights. Her whole purpose is to just be quiet and do whatever the alphas say. And she is just there as a tool. And 2 out of the 3 brothers use her just for that. There's nothing else. They don't care about her emotional needs. They don't care about anything. She is very aware of her situation and very aware of her role. So she never, like, I really liked her character because she's never, like, affected by the things that are happening to her, because it kind of sets up the fact that in the world that everybody knows their role, and in a dystopian world that's usually how it is. So like it might be kind of offensive to somebody, but I personally thought that the fact that she wasn't affected by this and that she knew what she was, and like that she was owned and that she had a role to play, I thought was just a good world building part of it. She's just like there to be passed around, and that's what she does. She gets passed around, and they all kind of come up with a schedule for her where they all just bang her whenever they want. One of the brothers is very indifferent. He doesn't give a crap. He's just like, you come into my office at this time on this day, we bang, and I don't want to talk to you, just leave. And that's it. One of the brothers is very cruel. He has an Omega already. It is a male, and he is basically just like chained up in his basement for him to abuse. So he is just kind of sadistic. And then you have the 3rd brother, who actually starts to feel something for this Omega, and he actually starts to get really protective. But the father says, nobody can claim this Omega, it is everybody's. But obviously he starts to, like, you know, become attracted to her on a different level. So they kind of start this like really slow relationship, but at the same time they both understand that she has to keep banging his brothers. So this is why I said this is kind of something for somebody who's read Omegaverse before and understands like the universe, because it's not a normal dynamic. So it's very expected of her to like bang all the brothers at the same time, but she is building a relationship with one of them, but then they also can't really, I don't know. Anyways, so there are some triggers in this. There is a very unfortunate kind of actually very graphic scene between her and the sadistic brother that is really sad and triggering for people that might be sensitive to that kind of thing. Be advised of that if you ever read this book. But outside of that, I really liked the book, and I don't want to give anything away because there are secrets and there are twists and turns, and it is not just a like Omegaverse fest. Like there is actually like story. Again, I don't want to give anything away, but there is another book that I haven't read yet, but this is not a standalone whatsoever. So if you go into it, just expect that there is going to be a cliffhanger and that you have to read book 2. Book 2 is out though. So I have a big problem like when I read Stolen by the Wolves, the second book was not out yet, and I kind of freaked out a little bit. And I know I haven't read the second book yet, but at the time, like I was freaking out a little bit. Those are all the Omegaverse books I have for you guys today. Hit that like button. It really helps me out. Comment also really helps me out. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed already, and I will see you guys all next time. Bye!